So hello everybody, welcome to Managed Metadata 140, SharePoint Taxonomy, Metadata, and the new document library experience. Want to thank everyone for joining today. This is a follow-up or companion webinar to our previous webinars about SharePoint and the term store called Managed Metadata 101, 201, and 301. If you haven't seen those webinars, that's okay. This is a complimentary webinar, but some of the features you'll see today, if you're interested in deploying those or interested in knowing how to use taxonomy and SharePoint more in depth, those would be great resources, and those are linked at the bottom of our slides, at the end of the slides, I should say. My name is Mark Lair. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of WAND, and I've been in the taxonomy space for over 14 years. I've built taxonomies, worked on SharePoint taxonomy projects, and just have quite a bit of experience in the space. And the next slide is going to go on to WAND, about WAND, but while I do that, I'm going to launch a poll to give a little context. And the poll question today is just going to ask you, what version of SharePoint are you on? And while I talk about WAND, you can answer that. So WAND is a company. We're based in Denver, Colorado, and we are solely focused on helping our clients develop taxonomies for a variety of enterprise applications. We have been building taxonomies since 1983, been a standalone company since 1998, and our model is that we provide access to our library of predefined taxonomies, and we've developed taxonomies covering most industry vertical segments and business functional areas. So we provide access to that library, and our clients find it's much easier to customize predefined taxonomies specific for their business rather than developing taxonomies from scratch. So that's a little bit about WAND. Today is really designed to be an educational webinar. We want these to be sessions where you can learn about SharePoint and not necessarily learn about WAND's products. I'll touch on WAND's products for 30 seconds at the end. Otherwise, we're here to talk about SharePoint. And I will close the poll since most of the folks have voted at this point. And before we jump into our agenda, share the results. So almost half of you today are on SharePoint Online, which is great, 47%, 35% on SharePoint 2013, and only 7% are on 2016 at this point. That is interesting. A lot of this content today is going to be mostly relevant to SharePoint Online, but these features are going to be rolled out to SharePoint 2016 on-premise shortly. And then there's some hybrid scenarios as well. So our agenda today, we're going to start off with just a brief update about SharePoint taxonomy. So the great thing about SharePoint Online is new features are rolled out all the time. So we're going to give an overview of some of those new features with a particular emphasis on the taxonomy and metadata features. WAND and myself, we're not SharePoint overall experts or consultants, but we have some expertise around the taxonomy and metadata features. So that's what we are really going to be focusing on today. Second, after that, some of the features, we'll dig into the hybrid taxonomy scenario a little bit. We'll talk about Delve profiles and how those are leveraging managed metadata. But then we'll really get into the main focus of the webinar, which is the modern document library experience, or the new document library experience. So we'll talk about how to enable those. We will walk through some of those general features of the modern document library experience, and then we'll dig into the metadata and taxonomy specific features. Talk about how and when you may want to revert to the classic experience or the old experience, some of the unsupported features in the modern library experience. And then we'll wrap up showing how to set up views for drag and drop tagging, which is a great new way that you can tag documents with metadata, which we're excited about because I think if you guys are SharePoint administrators or run your company's SharePoint, it's hard to get people to tag. So it's nice to see new, easier, sort of fun ways to tag content in SharePoint. And then we'll do a Q&A. So SharePoint updates, and as I said, there's new features regularly added to SharePoint Online. Those are rolled out on a regular basis. So it's a good idea to keep an eye on your admin messaging center, which is right here. If you go to the Office 365 admin, right here is the messaging center. And you can see even just in the last week, there's been a few notices. There's been a few more since I took these screenshots. So if you're on Office 365, keep your eye on that. You will be able to see the new features that get released and determine if and how you want to deploy those. And for on-premise new features, the nice thing about SharePoint 2016 is they're going to be releasing some of the SharePoint Online features to the on-premise version via feature packs. So the first feature pack was released last year. There's a second one planned for this year. So I think some of the more popular or effective features of SharePoint Online will find their way to SharePoint 2016 on-premise. So it's a good idea to keep your eye out for announcements of those feature packs. Some of the big SharePoint updates as it specifically relates to taxonomy. Number one, hybrid taxonomy is now in general release. That just happened in the last week or so. And this is relevant for SharePoint 2013 and SharePoint 2016. I've included a link here so you can read more about it specifically from Microsoft. We'll dig into this in just a moment. Second is Delve profiles. Those are a replacement for kind of the my profiles or my user experience in SharePoint. And with Delve, users can now actually tag themselves with terms from managed metadata. We'll touch on that. And then, of course, the modern document library experience is a whole new approach to the document library, look and feel, new features, and there's some great metadata features within that. So first, like I said, we're going to briefly touch on the hybrid and Delve. And the hybrid taxonomy scenario is basically designed to make it easy to have the same taxonomy across hybrid environments. So previously, if you had a hybrid environment, and hybrid means that you're using a combination of SharePoint Online and SharePoint on-premise. So you might want to keep your data on SharePoint on-premise, but use some of the new features or libraries in SharePoint Online. So previously, there wasn't an easy way to synchronize the taxonomies between your SharePoint Online term store and your SharePoint on-premise term store. So people in hybrid environments struggled with that quite a bit of using a consistent taxonomy. So this hybrid scenario is a major leap forward for governance for this consistency. And the way it works is that your taxonomy is managed in SharePoint Online. And then there is a daily replication job to keep that taxonomy in sync with your on-premise SharePoint term stores. And you can do this across multiple on-premise farms. So it's kind of a nerdy administrative feature, but from a consistency and a governance standpoint, this is a big leap forward if you're doing hybrid SharePoint. And it maybe removes one of those big barriers that might have had in the past for deploying managed metadata and taxonomy. Second big update I think that's worthwhile to be aware of is the Delve profile. So Delve is a feature in SharePoint Online that's designed to really complement search a little bit, but instead of making people search for documents, it uses a concept of a social graph or an office graph to surface content that it thinks might be interesting to users based on interactions with that content. So for example, if I'm working on a team with 5 people and we all report to the same manager, if I give a presentation in a meeting with my manager, that presentation may be surfaced to my other team members as something they may be interested in. So now users can actually tag their own Delve profiles based on taxonomy terms. And this is a great way, a good incentive to create taxonomy in SharePoint to make sure that people are tagging themselves with consistent concepts. And that's the goal of taxonomy. So if we look here, a screenshot of Delve, you can see under my skills and expertise, I'm beginning to use a Typeahead, and it's actually suggesting concepts from the taxonomy that I have in my term store. So I can tag myself with human resources or human diversity, or hopefully not human error, but perhaps in the IT taxonomy. And now people are going to be able to search for me based on this expertise within Delve, and you can do interests and hobbies and projects as well. So it's a nice application of taxonomy. But I'm going to raise the question, could there be a little bit better support? And one role that Juan tries to take in the SharePoint space, because our clients are building taxonomies, is we want to evangelize for better support for taxonomy and manage metadata within SharePoint and the SharePoint ecosystem. So I'm going to do something a little obnoxious here and make a shameless plug. And one way that Microsoft is looking at new features for SharePoint Online and things they might roll out to SharePoint 2016 and feature packs and future versions is based on their Microsoft user voice. So we've written some articles about taxonomy being the missing signal in Microsoft Delve and really advocating for better support for taxonomy within Delve and within Office 365 and SharePoint in general. So if I go back a couple slides, you can see I'm connected to taxonomy, the term store, but maybe I'd like to narrow this field and only allow people to tag with certain taxonomies. Or maybe I'd like to go into the term store and say, yeah, this taxonomy is for Delve profiles, but these taxonomies are not for Delve profiles, and customize things a little bit more. We'd also like to see when Delve is surfacing information, instead of just surfacing it based on the fact that Mark Lair is working with Jane Doe and they both report to John Smith, and they shared a presentation, you could be surfacing information based on the topics of content, and that would allow for much greater sharing and really expose the power of a controlled vocabulary, controlled taxonomy. So my shameless plug, we're going to do this. I'm going to put the link in the chat. You don't have to do this, of course, but I've created a Delve page or a feature request that says that Delve should have more explicit manage metadata support. And if you're so inclined, you can come to this page and you can give your vote. So the reason I'm doing this in this webinar is because I want to get a lot of votes so that my community of people who are interested in taxonomy in SharePoint can make their voices heard, and hopefully we can drive better features, better taxonomy features into the SharePoint and Office 365 ecosystem. And that's going to drive benefits for people who have invested in taxonomy. That's going to make that taxonomy more valuable. So if you're so inclined, come to this page, click on vote. You can give 1, 2, or 3 votes. 3 votes would be great. But that is the end of my shameless plug for this webinar. There's also a link to the LinkedIn article explaining why, if you want to dig into that more after the webinar. So we're almost done with the slides, which everyone can breathe a sigh of relief. Let's look at the SharePoint modern document library, the new document library experience. So like I said, it's available in SharePoint Online right now. I'll show you how to turn it on. It's going to be rolled out to SharePoint 2016 in Feature Pack 2, which is going to be released in 2017. It's a better user experience on the computer, but it's also designed for better mobile support. So if you have a lot of users who are now accessing SharePoint on a mobile device, the new document library experience is going to support that much more effectively. And let's go take a look. So the first thing you have to do is you actually have to turn on the new document library experience. And the way you're going to do that is this whole demo is going to be in SharePoint Online, of course. So if you're using SharePoint 2016, this experience may be slightly different when that is rolled out in the feature pack. But we're going to go to our Office 365 admin. And when we go to admin, we're going to come down to admin centers and SharePoint. And now we're going to come to settings. So here's a lot of the new setting for SharePoint. And generally when they do roll out new features in SharePoint 2016, you may have a chance, or SharePoint Online, I should say, you'll have the chance to turn them on or off initially within this interface. So the important setting here is SharePoint Lists and Library Experience, right here. And you're going to see two buttons, Classic Experience and New Experience. And if you haven't changed this yet, it's going to probably be set to Classic Experience. But if you want the New Experience, you want to change it to New Experience and Auto Detect. And what Auto Detect means is not every feature of the old Classic Experience is yet supported in the new document library. So Auto Detect makes it safe. It'll say if you have a document library that's using an older feature that's not yet supported, maybe some custom code. Previously, there was some metadata navigation that wasn't supported. It will default to the Classic Experience, so that way you're not breaking anything for your users. And as they continue to roll out new features for the new document library experience, there'll be fewer and fewer auto-detecting needing to take place. And as I should say, as a note, if you're listening to a recording of this was made on March 1st, 2017, there may be more features supported than when this webinar took place. So you want to keep it on the new experience. In my experience, if you change within the admin, it doesn't propagate to your libraries instantaneously. I did this yesterday, and it took about 2 hours for that change to take place. I was moving it back to Classic and back to new experience to test. So don't get too panicked if it doesn't happen right away. And as a note, and I just saw a question that prompted this, the Classic experience will eventually go away, but it should be supported. Microsoft is saying really all the way through 2017. Again, I think they're waiting to make sure they can support all the features that people had in Classic in the new experience. So mine's already on new experience, so I'm going to leave it there, and we can go to the new experience webinar site, team site. So this is just a document library that I've set up, but you'll see it has the new experience. My pretend case today is that it's just a library of project management documents at an organization. And it's using the WAN project management taxonomy. You can see I've set up this manage metadata column. Again, at the admin level, you can turn on the new experience, but that doesn't mean that you're at the document library level that you have to have the new experience. If an individual document library still wants to have Classic, they can do so. And you'll notice that there is now no ribbon interface in the new document library experience. We just have this taskbar. But if we want to go back to Classic, you can still find library settings up here on the right at the gear icon and go to library settings. And this is going to look pretty similar. It's really the same screen as before. We're going to go to advanced settings. And now at the very bottom, we can display this. You can choose how to display the list. So you can choose the new experience or the Classic experience or default set by administrator. I'm going to choose Classic. And you'll see, whereas As I said, if you did it at the central admin or the Office 365 SharePoint admin, it will take a while to propagate. If you do it at the library level, that change takes place right away. So here we are back at the classic document library experience. We have our ribbon back. And I can go back to library settings. But this is, of course, about the new library experience. So we're going to go back and change it. But that will take place right away. You can also set it up. You can see there's 3 options. So if you don't want to have the new experience as the default across all your site collections, etc., the individual document library could still choose to have the new experience. But we're going to set it back, go back to project management. The last thing I'll note on this from a changing back and forth, an individual user is going to have this return to classic SharePoint button on the lower left. So if there is a feature, if you've got a document library and there's a classic feature they want, or just something they like that experience better, they can click on return to classic for the time being, and it'll take them back to that previous experience. There's no button to return back to modern. So they would to get back to modern, they need to close out their browser entirely and then come back to SharePoint, and then it will go back to what was set up by the document library owner or by the administrator. But this is kind of a catch-all button or a safety button if someone wants that classic experience. So as I mentioned, we'll kind of walk through some of the big features. Like I said, there's no ribbon anymore. We're now going to see this taskbar across the top. The nice thing with the new document library experience is there's some great ways to interact with the properties of an individual document. So if I click on a document now, you can see the tasks change a little bit. So now I'm talking about individual documents. We'll talk about a few of these features in a moment. But the first thing I would point you to is this little icon, this information panel icon on the right. And if we open that up, that is going to give us all the metadata information about the document in one place. So previously you might have had to open up the properties panel or whatever it might be. Now it's in one spot. You actually get a document preview at the top that you can scroll through, which I think is a really great feature. And then down here, we're seeing the metadata values. So here's name, title, project management. We can see the recent activity on the document. You can do sharing. And then just some of this metadata. So it's a single panel where we can get all the information panel where we can get all the metadata about that particular document. And again, in previous SharePoint, if you wanted to change the metadata on a piece of content, you might have to go view properties. But now we can use that panel on the left. And I'm just going to go to this project timeline document. Open up its panel. Here's its properties. There's no text here, so I can actually add that. I'm going to give it a new title. And under the project management, I can tag it. So this is driven by the taxonomy. It's the vocabulary of project management terms that has been set up in the term store by my company. And you can see it might suggest some common concepts that are used frequently or recently, or I can do Typeahead. And this is a project timeline. And you can see it's doing an autocomplete. Same way as it works in the previous versions of SharePoint or SharePoint 2013, but it's nice I can do it right here in this information panel. Just an easier way for people to tag and interact with metadata. And as before, I can use the Typeahead, or I can click on this tag icon, and it'll let me browse through the taxonomy, or I can actually see where that term exists in the taxonomy. So really nice, much easier to go to this information panel rather than the view properties of each individual document when I'm tagging. You can also still do edit all, which is more of an experience similar to previous versions where it's going to have that separate properties panel. I don't think this is really that useful anymore because it's so easy to do it in the information panel, but this is still available where you can edit content here. Second change, or similar actually to a feature in SharePoint 2013 and previous versions, but now you can do a quick edit. And this is just a little bit slicker. So this is nice if I'm tagging a lot of documents at the same time. These are already tagged, but here's my business process document. It doesn't have a metadata value, so I can just click right here. And again, do that same type of type ahead and choose my value. You can do copy and drag, and you can see here, if I wanted to, I could drag these down and tag multiple documents. So this quick edit's a great way to tag a large number of documents at once. Again, just makes it easier for people to tag content and to interact with the taxonomy that you've defined, and that's a big plus if you can make it easier. Just as with the type ahead, I can also click on this tag and use this same type of experience to tag that way. And now I click done, and it's going to take me back. We'll come back to that interface in a little bit. Next thing that is interesting, and to be fair, this has not worked for me great all week, but this is on the Microsoft site, so maybe a little bit of a bug. But up here is this filters panel, and I can open that up, and this should be bringing up smart filters of the metadata in here to allow me to basically combine filters. It's a way that I can take a large document library and add filters to narrow down on the content that I'm actually interested in. And it's not coming up, but I will go over. It seems to break when I add a manage metadata column. This is what it should look. It should give me a filter by name, modified by. So even though it's not working, I trust that it will be soon. It defaults to, again, the name, modified, file type, and modified date. So some of those three basic metadata filters that you see in SharePoint. But I can add my own custom. So here's my project management column, and I can click on it, go to column settings, and pin it to the filter pane. So that is actually going to allow me to use project management as a filter in that smart filters panel. So that's a much easier way to deploy filters. Previously in the classic experience, you had to set up those filters separately on the left, and they weren't quite as, they're a little bit more unwieldy. We walked through that in Manage Metadata 101, I believe, if you're interested in seeing that. So big improvement on the filtering, and I think that's also going to propagate down to your mobile environment. It makes it easier for people to use filters in the mobile experience. Next big change is just different views. So list is kind of the default that everyone's used to in SharePoint, but now there is a tile view. And this is just something, again, a little bit better for the mobile environment. It's also something that people are beginning to get used to from a user experience standpoint or a UX design standpoint. The tiles are something folks are used to, and you can see the brief front page of the document. So a slightly different view. There's some really cool tagging that you can do with these tiles that we're going to go through in just a moment. So we'll come back to that. So other features of the document, new document library experience that are not necessarily taxonomy specific. One thing we can do now is add a link. So this is a big leap forward from a duplicate management perspective. Previously, if you wanted a document in more than one place, you actually had to create a copy of it. So that's not ideal because then you have duplicate content across SharePoint and you can get the version split. Not ideal. Now I can come to new link. You can see my recent documents. So I can just, I'm just going to choose this one. Let's see where that guy went. Okay, so here's the link I just created. You can see the document type. If I click on it, it'll take me to that document where it actually lives elsewhere, which is here in my documents folder, or in my documents document library, not my project management one. The cool thing is it's a link, but I can still tag this link. So I can assign the metadata properties for this document library, but I don't have to move the actual document. So that is pretty valuable, again, from an overall governance and content management standpoint in SharePoint. Here, if I click on a specific document, there's sharing built in right here. I can get a link, which I might use for sharing, or I might use to link that document somewhere else. Download and delete, those are pretty self-explanatory. One cool new feature for popular documents within a document library is pin to the top. This isn't metadata related, but if you have a document library and there's, let's say it's HR, and there are 3 forms that people are asking for again and again, there's no need to leave them buried within the whole list. Pin them to the top. Now, if someone comes to this document library, they're going to see the most popular documents. We can reorganize these things. They still exist in the lower list, but again, they sit up here at the top. There's new features around moving documents within the library. So I can select a few documents and move them. That's going to move them to a folder. Within the document library. I'm just going to lazily create it called new folder and move them. So that's an efficient way to move content within a library and organize things. And I can also copy, and I can move it to other locations within SharePoint. That makes it easier to do that. Again, I think using a link is probably the superior way to do it, but if you still want to copy things, this is a much easier way to move that content. So an improvement in overall content management. Okay, so we're going to demonstrate the drag and drop tagging of content using the new document library experience. I'll just leave that. So what I want to do is I have a project management library, and I want to store all my project management documents here across my company. And I already have a column of project management document type, which I've tagged this content with, and that's great. But what I want now is a column that talks about the type, the actual project name. And again, the value of using taxonomy to do that is I make sure that everybody is using the same project name, so everything is tagged consistently. If I provide that list, it's going to make sure there's no misspellings, etc., or variations which may occur if people are tagging by them, just doing keyword-based tagging. So I'm going to go to the term store and come to Site Settings and Term Store Management under Site Administration. I can also get to the term store through Central Admin. I'm going to open up a term group. And in my term group, I'm going to create a new term set. You can see I can also import a term set, which again, if you were using a taxonomy from Juan's library, you would download it and customize it and then import it this way. But in this case, I'm just going to create my own term set. I'm going to call it project name. And I'm going to right click on the term set name and I can begin to create some new terms. And I've just come up with a few made up projects that my company is working on. I did that in the wrong spot. So I have my 4 projects. I'm going to keep this a little bit fast again. If you want to look into detail on creating taxonomies and how to use the term store and what all this content and options mean, check out the Manage Metadata 101 webinar. We go through that in pretty significant detail. I'll just add a few synonyms as well for Project Sunset, so we can show that. So we've created a brief new taxonomy, and this is actually just a list of values. You may wonder again, why create this? Why don't I just create a metadata column and do a pick list within the document library? You could, but doing it here is nice because if a project name changes, you can make that adjustment here and that'll propagate to all your document libraries. If you want to use this list across a lot of content, so maybe you have a project management, but you have a client deliverables and a few other documents that you want to tag with project names, all of those can just grab them from the term store. So that's a good reason to create them here. I'm going to go back to the new experience webinar site, and you can see there's a plus here. So in earlier versions of SharePoint, you would need to go to the library ribbon and say new column. Now I can just click right here. Theoretically, let me refresh this. Okay, there it worked. So click on this plus and it allows me to add a new column, and I can choose my column type. What I don't see here is manage metadata, and manage metadata is the type of column that I want to create that uses taxonomies. So I'll go to more, give it a column name. This is the same type of experience you'd see in the classic library as well. So manage metadata. And I'm going to go to this view of my term store. And here's project name. So this is the one we just created. I'm going to choose this whole group. And again, what this is saying is that this new column that I've created can only be populated with the 4 values that are within that taxonomy. So now I have project name. I'm going to go to quick edit. And add some project names. Now what's important for the drag and drop tagging, which we'll see in a moment, is at least one piece of content has to have been tagged to that item before I can leverage the drag and drop. So you can see I'm typing ahead. It's giving me my list. Like I said earlier, I can, if I wanted to, I can drag these down. Project X. And again, with the type ahead, you remember if I added that synonym, the project sunset, I can just begin to type in SUN, and you can't, I'm having trouble expanding this, but you'll see here's the term name, and over here in parentheses is the synonym sunset. So that way if someone began to type in sunset, SharePoint using the term store says, okay, I know what that term is, but your company has decided to call it Project Sunset. That's again the power of taxonomy to make sure people are using content consistently. So I could continue to tag this way, but it's all maybe feels maybe there's a better way. So I'm going to click on done. Kind of want to unpin that guy. Okay, so I clicked on done. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to the tile view. And what you'll see now is I have this button called Arrange. And I'm click on Arrange. And when I do that, if you look, when I click it on, I get these name modified, modified by, project management, and project name. I'm going to choose project name and just group by project name. And what you see now is let's see, I just broke something. That happens during webinars, so bear with me for a moment. Okay, I did more Project Cupid. So I'm going to go back to project management. And you can see unassigned. What I can do though is now I can drag things. I don't know where my Project Nitro is, but if I can go through all the items that I know are Project Cupid and just drag them down here. And you can see that things are beginning to populate. So this is a really convenient way and a nice way to sort large groupings of documents into subsets. So kind of the best time to use this is if you have a few items. So if you're trying to tag it to a taxonomy of really more than 10 items or a complex taxonomy, this isn't going to be the best way to do it. But if you just want to organize things into project names like this, it can be a very convenient way to just do tagging. And here's the other ones. I don't know why they hadn't appeared before. But this is just, I think, a more user-friendly, a little bit more fun, if we can use that term around taxonomy and tagging, way to organize content. And it's a pretty fast way to do it as well. So I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to get rid of that group. And now I'm just back to my list. But if I come back to the list view, now we can see a few more items of content have been tagged. And again, because it's now tagged, if I wanted to, I can still use my header filters and filter by the taxonomy name or by the project names. So nice new user experience around tagging, around filtering content, all within this new document library experience. So we're going to wrap up. We'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. Again, in the slides, I wanted to provide some resources. There's some links throughout to Microsoft Knowledge Base, pieces of content. Here's some links to WAND webinars. This is the list of unsupported features. And again, when I said at the beginning for that classic library experience and default to classic, this is the list of features that are only available in classic mode. And again, this is subject to change. So some of the items on this list, like metadata navigation and filtering, actually is supported now. So it's a good idea to keep on top of the new features as they roll out. And again, the plan is by the end of, they're through 2017 to support the classic experience while they implement these features into the new document library experience. Brief commercial before we head to questions. Again, the way WAND helps our clients is we have built a library of predefined taxonomies for industries and business functional areas. So we give access to these taxonomies via our WAND taxonomy library portal. You can download any of them into SharePoint format and customize them specifically for your business. So it's a very efficient way to create a specific taxonomy for your industry and for your business functional areas. If you're interested in seeing a demonstration, please reach out. With that, I'm going to pop open the questions panel. If you have any questions now, again, type them in. If I don't answer them on the call, we will. I will be answering them in writing, and these will be distributed to everybody. If you have a specific question, still add it. I'll genericize it for the distribution list. Okay, so the first question is, we use taxonomy to drive global navigation in classic view. When the new modern view was pushed, it broke the global navigation. Is this fairly common? That is a great question. That's one of the features that was not supported in the new document library experience. And just in the last couple weeks, we saw that the navigation is now supported. And let me see if I can go show you guys an example of that in SharePoint. So the short answer to your question is yes, that is common. If the new library did not support a feature, then it will break that functionality. But that's the value of clicking on the default to classic view. So that way, if you are using a piece of content, a feature that you need, and here we go. Here's what we're talking about with the global navigation. These navigation menu items are actually driven by content in the term store, by a taxonomy that was created. See if I can find that particular taxonomy. That might be down here. Yeah, so here's the manage navigation. That's actually not. It's actually in a different site collection, so I apologize. But this is driven by a taxonomy that was developed in the term store. So this is the global navigation that was not supported by the modern document library experience. But now if I go to a modern document library, fairly recently I did this, you can see now it still is supported. Or it now is supported. So check that again. It will break it, but hopefully these features get supported and you can continue along. Next question. Is there any way to add related terms to the managed metadata term store as opposed to synonyms? So that is a good question. And the answer is no, there's not out of the box with SharePoint. The SharePoint term store taxonomy management supports broader terms, narrower terms, and synonyms. It does not support related terms. An example of a related term I like to use a retail example. If I'm shopping for laptop computers as my category, a related concept might be laptop computer cases. It's not really a broader term or a narrower term in the true sense of the content, but someone who's looking at laptop computer cases laptop computers may also be interested in laptop computers. It's a good way to direct users to other content. Out of the box, not supported by the SharePoint term store. There are third-party add-ons that provide more robust taxonomy and ontology editors. So you can manage your taxonomies in those external tools and bring them into SharePoint. We also are, that's part of the evangelism that Wand is doing around, that's why I wanted you guys to vote on that Delve feature. We'll be putting up similar links for other features that we want to see. And an upcoming article that we're going to be publishing is here's the features we'd like to see in the SharePoint term store and how the SharePoint term store actually should be a separate feature and could be deployed more effectively across different Office applications. So I always have a long answer, but try to revert to a short answer. The short answer is no, you can't do those related terms just with the default SharePoint. So here's a quick question, if you guys will indulge me, since I did my shameless plug. It's a question about Delve. I have not used Delve. What are Delve board names? If I come over to Delve, we can show that. So here's a board I've created. Boards are basically, if you think of it just in the very literal, like a bulletin board. If you're in an office in 1950, you might set up a bulletin board on the wall for documents about an advertising campaign you're working on, and people would pin those documents up there, and everyone who's interested in that concept could come over to that board and see the documents. So this is a digital version of that, is that I can set up a board, and there's no items to show here, but I can actually add documents to this board so other people can see it. Part of the article and part of our evangelism is that the Delve board should be actually driven by the term store so that people can, again, be choosing board names that are consistent with the vocabulary that the company wants to use. Or if someone creates a board name that's not in the taxonomy, that might be a term that should be suggested, and the corporate librarian should look at that term and say, well, that could be added to the taxonomy. It would also be valuable because if the board names were driven by terms from the taxonomy, then documents elsewhere in the organization that got tagged with that same name, those could be suggested back to that board or to the board owner as something that may be added to that board. So that's, again, the value of taxonomy, is making sure everyone's using a common language. And then when people are using that language in different places in the organization, associations can be made. Oh, that's the same concept. Maybe these things should go together. Or maybe Mark Lair, who said he's an expert on his Delve profile in magnetics, maybe he'd be interested in the Delve board that was set up called magnetics. So those, again, just a few thoughts on how taxonomy can be powerful and can be valuable. A couple of minutes left. I'll answer one more question, and then we will wrap up. So last question, what is the best way to apply metadata tags to entire libraries or folders in the modern view? So we've looked at the way, there's a few ways that you can tag content in SharePoint. So we looked at the quick edit view. That allows you to tag the entire list of content in one screen, so without going to that information panel each time. If I wanted to tag a large library of content manually, I would use that quick edit view because it lets me copy and paste. It lets me drag down. It lets me tag every document from a single interface. So that's a very efficient way to do it. Beyond that, you can, if you're not picky or if you want to get some initial course tagging to take place, you can do metadata inheritance based on folder location or based on just the document library or default values. The good thing about that is it gets your content tagged. The bad thing is it's not specific to each individual document. So you have to weigh the pros and cons. I think the quick edit really is the best way to do it, to tag large amounts of documents. The third option would be a third-party add-on that does do automatic tagging, and there's a variety of solutions out there that use different approaches from natural language processing to just keyword and synonym matching to statistical models to training sets. Those are good to get your content tagged, but they do take a little more hands-on time to train the model. So it's the pluses and minuses. You just have to weigh the benefits, and it may be driven, the right answer may be driven by the volume of content you have and the type of content you have and the accuracy that you need. So there are a few other questions. I'll make sure all of those get answered in the written Q&A document. I just want to say thank you to everybody for taking some time today to learn about SharePoint metadata and the new document library experience. There is a survey as you exit the webinar. We would love it if you'd answer that for us, just 3 short questions on your impression of the webinar. And otherwise, if anyone has any questions about taxonomy or would like to learn more about Juan's products, my contact details are on this page. Please feel free to reach out. We are happy to be a resource to the SharePoint taxonomy community in general. So again, thank you. This is Mark Lair, and really appreciate everybody's time today.